Hey guys, it's Hadi from Wrestless here. In today's episode, I got to have a discussion with Teflon Jon. Teflon Jon is an indie wrestler out of San Antonio, Texas, who is the current United champion. He's wrestled for promotions like Reality of Wrestling, United, Heavy Metal Wrestling, and more. We discuss various aspects of his career, like how he made the Teflon Jon character, his signature style, his entrance music, and what inspired him to become such a great promo in the business. Join us, and as always, stay restless. Welcome to the Restless podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me, none other than the Revelator himself, Teflon Jon. Teflon, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it a whole
Of
lot.
course, yeah, just before we got started, we were talking about how you've had such a busy week in wrestling. Go ahead and tell the people what are some of the matches you've been having lately, because there's been a lot of blood spilt on the canvas lately.
Yes. Um, well, blood spilt for good reason. Um, Selfish blood, I should say, not blood of anybody that doesn't deserve it. Um, Friday, I wrestled in Austin in a dog collar match um, with a selfish man named Aaron Mercer. Um, and after that, Saturday, I came back to my city, San Antonio, and I wrestled an even more selfish person named Stud Stash. Um, and that blood that you saw on that mat, that was partially Stud Stash's, but it was also the blood of one King Rob Love, the most selfish man I've ever met in all of wrestling. Thinks that everybody watches him and watches his story, his journey of wrestling, when in reality there's nobody watching. And he is delusional to a point where only real blood, real pain could help him see what actually is going on. And that was my mission on Saturday, and I achieved it, and I achieved it well. So, yeah, there was a lot of blood on that map.
There definitely was, and speaking of that dog collar match with Aaron Mercer, you and Aaron Mercer, your two paths have crossed many times. You guys have had a series of battles. What has it been like being stuck with this guy and being put in multiple matches with him?
um, I, I will say that Aaron Mercer is very passionate about wrestling. And whenever someone is very passionate about wrestling, it's very easy to go in there and create good wrestling with them. It doesn't matter if you are friend or foe, as long as the real love and the real passion for this sport, this art, whatever you want to call it, as long as that's there, it never feels like you're stuck with a person, unless unless you really are stuck with the person. When but that's never a wrestler's fault. It's usually someone else's.
Definitely. And when you guys decided that this match has to be a dog collar match, what were the conversations like to make it a dog collar match? Um, is how many dog collar matches have you had in your career? How would you prepare for something like this?
Well, it wasn't my decision to make it a dog collar match. That was all Aaron Mercer. And at some point, you're just along for the ride, and you say, you know what? Okay, I'll give you what you want. He has his own reasons for why he wanted it to be a dog collar match. I feel like I know what they are, but that's not for me to confirm. That might be something for Aaron Mercer to talk about. But uh, I've never been in a dog collar match. This was my first time in one, and the chain that connected the collars was way heavier than I thought it was going to be. So maneuvering around this big steel chain while you're trying to beat a guy up and you're trying to move around smoothly and make everything look nice, like it's a little hard. It gets to be a little rough, but then again, I mean, sometimes that's what you need to make a match feel a certain way, something that's a little out of the ordinary, something that's a little in your way, per se. And I feel like that's what Friday night was just here's this ringer uh, this ringer stipulation that we're gonna throw at y'all and just do something with it, have fun with it. Did I have fun? The match wasn't fun, but if I can look back and say, solid night at the office, yeah.
For sure, it was a really good match in my opinion. And the buildup, what was special about the buildup is the video packages you've been doing, the promos. And you're someone who's considered a very good promo in the business, someone you can kind of hand the stick to and you can rely on that. Uh, is that kind of a talent that you felt like you've had since you've started wrestling, or is that something you had to develop over time with your promos?
Um, I think I think the gift of gab is something that you're born with. I don't know if I was born with it per se, but being raised around what I was raised around, I feel like I was always gonna have a knack to speak to an audience, to speak in a way that can make people either rise to their feet or sit in their seats in fear. It's not about how big someone is. It's not about how like they perceive themselves. It's all about how do you talk, and when you talk, how do you make people feel? Because that's something that is universal. You see it in politics, in religion. You see it in oration. You see it in all avenues of life. The ones that can speak well are the ones that are remembered. And that's something that I've kind of carried with me throughout my career because I'm not 6'4" to 290 pounds. I'm not this like former Division I collegiate football player, or all the different tropes that you go through in wrestling. By all sense of purposes, I'm a normal dude. I'm a little under 6 foot. I'm a young white guy with a beard and semi long hair. So how do I stand out? How do I make myself something that no one else is? And the one thing that I kind of saw was that there was no one who embraced the challenge of a promo, whether that be filming one or grabbing a mic live and saying something, saying something not to get themselves over per se, but to get themselves over in a way that advanced the story. Because at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want into a microphone, but if it doesn't help the overall product, there's no purpose for it. There's no reason for you to be doing it. And I think once I figured out that like, oh, this is not just me. Like there's a stage where you kind of have to get your emotions out of you. When you're real early in the game, you have all this like pent up, piss. I don't know what the language is on this show, but like piss and vinegar. Just
Feel free to speak how you want.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna keep it tame, but just like for that, just like all this like pent up stuff inside of you, and you want to like let it out. You see, on TV, you see like the Heymans, the Punks, the people that just like spew and spew, and it feels like it's real, and you want to get that out. But once you realize that it's like, no, we have to keep some kind of continuity here. Continuity of like, hey, we're trying to tell this story over, X amount of weeks, days, months, whatever. As long as your promo still connects the story to the audience, you're doing your job.
That's a really cool factor actually, because some would say what indie wrestling kind of misses is the story aspect of wrestling. Often we get this really great in-ring action, but a lot of people really do like that sports entertainment side of a great story being told. And you're kind of bringing that into indie wrestling. Is that something you were a fan of growing up, the story aspect of wrestling?
Absolutely. Also, I just noticed you're wearing an AFI shirt. That's nice. It's real nice, man.
Yeah, one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, I would say so. So full transparency, I grew up here in San Antonio. When I was a young kid, I was at the same church as Shawn Michaels here in town.
Oh
So
wow.
that was, he was my first, he was my first favorite wrestler, if you would say. And I caught Shawn in his second run. I was too young to watch him in the 90s. So when he came back in the early 2000s, and he's a totally different Shawn Michaels. To me, Shawn Michaels has the best redemption story in all of wrestling, maybe in all of sports. It is the quintessential, human redemption of you lived a certain life, before you found something that made you who you are today, that saved you, per se, religion aside. It's crazy to see someone do a complete 180 off screen and on screen. So to me, I feel like that story kind of set the template of like what I looked for in wrestling. And right after Shawn retired, here comes Summer of Punk. Here comes this guy that is, yeah, he's a great wrestler, but what hooked everybody was when he sits on a stage, Indian style, and drops the promo that pretty much changed wrestling, even to this day. But that was a story. That was something that was crafted in a way where they got attention and they got people hooked, with his contract, with what he was saying. Like, was he going to win the title in Chicago? All these little questions, that made everybody peak interest by the pay-per-view. And then you have this hot angle that kind of goes on. Me personally, I would have loved to seen it, done a certain way, but I'm not making the decisions over there. I'm just a kid, but yeah, that. And then just like, after that, you get D-Bry winning the title at Mania 30. Like that's a even crazier story, like those are the moments that, wrestling aside, people will look back at certain stills, certain images, and be like, oh, I remember what was going on. I remember how they got to that point. And I think that's the power of storytelling. And it's not even just in wrestling, it's in sports, it's in, politics, it's in like all these different avenues of life have stories to them. And when you can pinpoint like the story beats of real life, that's what makes real life fun to live, honestly.
That's really cool how you mentioned how the stories are kind of enveloped everywhere in corners of life. And talking about the kind of the succession of stories in WWE, the Shawn Michaels redemption story, CM Punk, then Daniel Bryan. Speaking of CM Punk, he just made his return to AEW and Collision. What's like your opinions on that? What'd you think of it?
It's good for business, man.
Are you still a fan
CM
of CM
Punk
Punk?
is absolutely, absolutely. CM Punk, at one time was, when I was 13 or 14 years old, just becoming a teenager. I see this guy on TV, who doesn't look like everybody else, who he was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the guy with a bunch of tattoos. I wanted to be the guy with like piercings on my face and coming out to like kill switch engage and what. Yeah, I wanted to be that guy, and I saw him create a spot for himself in a place where he had no business being. And it was crazy, and then to follow him, when he walks out, when he goes to the UFC, and still, yeah, I remember watching his first UFC fight with my white CM Punk shirt, the one from Chicago. I remember watching his UFC fight, watching him get his ass kicked. Uh, and but I was still holding on to like, that's my guy. That's my guy. He comes back. It's almost 2 years now. Almost 2 years. He comes back, and I remember I was wrestling in Sherman, Texas, for Texoma Pro, and I was I was wrestling that night, and I told everybody like, "Hey, don't say anything because I'm gonna take this 5 hour trip back home, and I'm gonna turn that thing on as soon as I get home." And yeah, dude, like I got goosebumps because it was just like that's your guy. You know, like you always have this attachment of just like that's my guy, that's my dude. No matter what he does, like unless you hear like some story about them being a piece of work behind the scenes or whatnot, you're kind of like, but that's my guy. Like no matter what, like the little kid inside me is always gonna be on Punk's team.
No, I definitely get that. I think like whether you love him or you hate him, the whole wrestling world is talking about him at the end of the day. And if they are
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about him, you want him on your TV program. So I think it's a great decision for AEW to bring him back, especially on Collision. And like you were just to like bring it back a moment, you were talking about how you felt like you were a normal guy, you're a white guy with a beard. And may I say, you have a very impressive beard. And
Oh, thank
most
you,
of the
thank you.
demographic for Restless is 18 to 25-year-old men, 85%. How would you advise men to grow better beards? How long did it
So
take to grow that
I
out?
Yeah, so I will say that this has not been fully shaven since October of 2021. So I have kept it kind of like this this length since then. I remember I shaved and I looked too much like a baby. So I decided I need to keep this beard as long as I can. Um, and really, I don't do a whole lot. I think it was the years and years of having a beard that looked like trash that ultimately led to me having a solid little thing on my face now. I just kind of take care of it. My barber does a lot of the work. She takes care of me very well. And yeah, I brush it every now and then. If there's a loose hair, I kind of just flick it off to the side. But I don't know. Maybe it's God given. I don't know.
I ask because I myself have a beard, but it gets like patchy every now and then. I want to know the secrets myself,
It'll
but
be there soon, man. It'll be there
uh,
soon.
I really hope so. Thank you. But you said you were born in San Antonio. You're a San Antonio native. Congratulations to the Spurs, by the way, for that number one pick. You must be pretty happy
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. And I mean that's going back to storytelling if I can again, that's another thing of just like I grew up in a city where basketball was God. Basketball was king out here. Like this is all we have. And the Spurs themselves, being a story piece of the NBA, of like here is this team that is not flashy, is not, doing a whole lot of things that make people go ooh and ah, but they're winners. And why are they winners? Because they have a system where it's like no one is above anyone else. They're totally different from everyone else. They can be a heel or a baby face depending on where you live. And they're going up against flashy guys like Kobe and Dirk and KG and even LeBron. LeBron joining the Heat, beating us in 2013 when we had it like right here, and then we come back the next year and beat them in 5 games. Like that's storytelling, and you can't write stuff like that. That's the stuff that like I look at.
No, definitely. I was a Spurs fan growing up because I'm a Houston native, but I wasn't a Rockets fan ever. KG was my
Mm-hmm.
guy. So Celtics were my team in the East, and the Spurs were my team in the West. I got my KG jersey hanging right in front of me. And when you mentioned them, like those teams with no egos, like San Antonio, it reminds you of teams like the Grind City Memphis team, or
Yeah.
even Boston during the rebuilding phase. So there's definitely storytelling in San Antonio that's super consistent. But being a South Texas guy, I remember like maybe a year ago, it used to come out to Paul Wall as your entrance music. Are you a fan of
Yes.
like South
Yes.
Texas music?
um yeah, I would say so. I remember the first rap song that I ever heard was in sixth grade. No, it's not sixth grade, second grade. And it was Chameleonaire. Chameleonaire was on the radio. It was, I mean, Chameleonaire and um, oh, it wasn't fun. Who's the one that sing? Who's the one that sings Shoulder Lean? Because Shoulder Lean was the other one that was like that was all over the radio. But I mean, you had like Grills too with Paul
Yeah.
Wall, and that was like one of the first ones I heard also. And it was just like I discovered it really early on in my life, and uh, my brother kind of ran the music in our house. I would just download whatever was on his iTunes library, and it introduced me to a lot of guys like Bun B, Paul Wall, Chameleonaire, Big Crit, just like all these different names that I could throw out there. But when I moved to Houston to start training, that's when I kind of, I just immersed myself in the city, and I tried to learn a little bit more. And then I remember I was in the gym here, and one of my coaches was from Houston, and they started playing "Break 'Em Off" in the gym, and I was like, "What is this song?" Like, because I had never heard, I didn't put two and two together. I didn't know it was Paul Wall, and I just heard it, and it had this swing to it that was super catchy, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna use this. I used it, and it ended up giving me what I needed at the time, which was confidence. I needed a lot of confidence because I was about 2.5 years into my journey here. I was young. I didn't know who I was really. I didn't know what I wanted to be when it came to wrestling, and I just decided, let me use this music to make myself, and I kind of just used it, and it gave me what I needed. It ended up, helping me make connections too. One of my guys in Texoma, out in Sherman, DJ Tony Snow, man. I remember I came out to that one time. He comes to the back. He says, "Hey, man, shout out on the Paul Wall music. Paul was the first guy that I DJ'd for." And I was like, "No way!" Like, just like that small connection, and me and Tony end up like making a connection where I've stayed in the dude's house after a show. Like, that's like something, like little things like that where you just never know where choosing something like that's going to take you. Yeah, I remember winning the Texoma championship. He told me that he sent a picture to Paul. So Paul Wall's seen me with the Texoma Pro Championship. I think that's a really
That's so
cool
cool.
thing that I can keep in the back of my hat. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's so cool, man. What was so you stopped using Paul Wall as your entrance music. What was the decision like to stop using the song?
Well, it's growth, not to say that I don't love that song, because I really do. But I think for where I'm at, just as a performer, as a wrestler, I needed something that was a little closer to who I actually was. And it was more, you know, I wasn't in Houston anymore. I had the confidence that that song was giving me, and I was using this other one by this band called Stick to Your Guns. Who I have a friend who's the cousin of the singer of that band, and like that's one that I just always really liked. I wanted to use it. I used it when I was wrestling for Inspire in Austin, um, and I had that, and there were some plans at Inspire that involved me, you know, getting thrown in a casket, and there was a potential resurrection that they had planned. Some things fell through for some reasons, but when that was the case, I was like, what could be what could be an avenue that we go down that is different. It's similar to other things that have been done, but it's different at the same time. And that's kind of when I came up with this whole Revelator persona. I was raised in the church. My father worked at a mega church. He wasn't a deacon or like anything on the pastoral side, but I was around them. You know, I was around that atmosphere for so long, and that's where I learned like how to control a crowd, man. You know, just watching promos, just watching long promos every Sunday. You know, like watching people make people rise to their feet. You know, make people shout. Like that's to me, that's where every wrestler should go, just to learn promos is church, and go to church. Like watch how these people react to something when they truly believe it. I think that's the other thing, is when they believe you, when they believe you, like believe what you're doing. That's when you have all the power in the world. So yeah, I was like, what's something that I could use, that is different, that can be used on anybody, a character that has beef with almost everybody. And that's when I kind of came up with the Revelator thing of like, there's a lot of things out there that seem to be signaling that wrestling is at a state that it hasn't been before, a state that's kind of closer to the end of wrestling, as I knew it when I was a kid, as I knew it when I was young, when I was a fan. Like there's something different. And I feel like everybody is contributing to that. What is it? What is the thing that they're contributing? Well, that's different for every person. So I think now I'm in a position where you can put me in there with any person, with any character, with any wrestler, and I will find something that, like, to them specifically is what is causing the end of my sport. And I'll be damned if I let them end the sport that I love, you know.
The Revelator is such an interesting character. Is that also when the name Teflon John came into use? Because I know you used to go by Johnny Bedlam. What was the transition of names like? Why did it kind of happen?
So it took way longer than it should have, honestly. I was Johnny Bedlam for years. And as I was Johnny Bedlam, I was put in a tag team with Tommy Bolton, and our manager was Dan the Man. And Dan, I was using like Teflon as like a moniker, right? Just like Teflon, like just Teflon. And after the match, he came up to me. He's like, "What about just like Teflon John? Just like that, just that." And I was like, that doesn't sound bad at all. And it was a way, I think at that point I was using it more in the way that they would use it for, say, like Michael Jordan or Ronald Reagan, where it was like there was no dirt on these guys, or when there was dirt, you couldn't catch them for it. You couldn't put the blame on them. It was like they were the spotless lamb. And I thought that was a cool concept for someone who thinks that they're never wrong, someone who thinks that everyone else is wrong. And then in the end, that's what a heel is that's what a villain is someone that just, they're not wrong. It's their motives, or not their motives. Sorry, it's not their motives. It's their actions that make them the villain.
Definitely, and I like that kind of untouchable type character, the the man who's always innocent in his mind, and the world is evil, and he needs to cleanse it, kind of thing going
Mhm.
on. You've been kind of wrestling at a bunch of different promotions as of lately. United, uh, Texoma, Inspire, all across the state of Texas. Do you ever see yourself like branching out of Texas soon, or has Texas is kind of do you find this to be your home for a while?
Well, I will say Texas is very big. So being here, it's almost like you do four different, like if you've done Austin, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, it's almost like four completely different markets, because it's
Yeah.
four different areas of Texas, with four different like backgrounds. And you can do a lot of different things, just staying in here. That being said, I mean, I would love to like wrestle in a different state. That'd be cool, you know. But I'm not rushing anything because I think over the last couple of years, I've realized that real life is more important. Real life is far more important than wrestling. And if an opportunity presents itself and it doesn't conflict with my real life, then yeah, absolutely, I'd love to. But I'm not, I am not starving to get to a different state. I'm not starving to get anywhere else because I've known people that have stayed in the same place for years and then they end up getting a good opportunity like after staying in that place for so long. And it's just there's multiple ways to go about this. There's the road where you can take like a bunch of road trips and you know go to all these different states and get noticed, but some people get noticed off the internet. You never know, like you never know how your journey's going to go in this business. So I'm not really like stressing getting everywhere. It's more so like, hey, if something comes up and the right person just happens to stumble upon what I'm doing, I would much rather take that.
Yeah, and like you said, the internet and social media has become very prominent, so you don't really need to travel so far to get noticed. Guys in Maryland or Wisconsin or California can notice you off their Instagram or Twitter, and you didn't have to make the trek yourself.
Hmm.
But you said you did your training in Houston. Why go to Houston for your training, and where did you train?
Booker T. Um,
Reality of Wrestling.
yes, the sole reason I moved to Houston. Um, I had done a what they call their fantasy camp about a year before that, and
Yes.
I ended up winning the whole thing. So they gave me the first 2 months of my training on the house at Reality of Wrestling. I started there in the summer of 2017. So I was a year out of high school. I did my first year of college at UTSA here in San Antonio, and then I transferred over to U of H, go Cougs. And I was there for 2 years. And after 2 years, I had kind of felt like I had accomplished everything that I wanted to do in Houston as a city. And I had my training under my belt. I learned a lot of things from Booker and everyone there at the school. My trainers like Gino Medina, Ryan Davidson, JJ Blake, guys like Rex Andrews, guys that just, knew wrestling, and like different people would say different things and the light bulb would go off. I had so many people that I could learn from. I met some of my, favorite people in wrestling over there, guys like Buzzsaw Samuels, Fly Def, just like guys that I'm still friends with to this day. Guys like Clay Roberts, people that have stayed at my house, met my mother, like that kind of stuff. Just so
Yeah.
that's what I remember fondly about my time in Houston. Like you're not supposed to stay in one place forever. I guess to counter the point that I made earlier, you're not supposed to stay in the same place forever. You could stay in the same area, but like eventually you have to go and find, who you are and what's best for you. And I think leaving Houston ultimately helped me do that. It helped me kind of branch out and find who I was, not like who I wanted to be as a wrestler, but like who are you as a person? And when you find out who you are as a person, how do you translate that to what you're doing in the ring?
It's super interesting. You said you were a Coug after 2017, right?
Yes, for two
Yeah,
years.
I
Yeah,
started. I started as a Coug in 2018, so it might have been crazy. We might have crossed paths and never
we
known
might.
it.
Hey, man, we may have crossed paths in the student center or over by the Panda Express and the McDonald's in the big old building with the campus shot. I don't know. I haven't been there in so long. So
Maybe you can find me in that Panda Express line pretty often, so maybe so. But moving on from getting trained at Reality of Wrestling and moving out, what was finding booking opportunities like venturing off on your own? Did you have someone trying to find opportunities for you, or was this solely a you mission?
Well, it's a mix of both. So you kind of have to bet on yourself of like, hey, I'm good enough to reach out to these people. But there were also people trying to reach out to me. You know, the first thing that I did when I like set back up in San Antonio was I started working weekly for a company called Heavy Metal Wrestling, which is ultimately where I became who I am now. I owe a lot of my confidence, a lot of my presence in the ring. I owe that to heavy metal. It gave me a weekly platform to figure out who I was for the better part of 2 years almost. And I consider that home. You know, we went through some stuff, even personally, like off camera. You know, there was some stuff that happened within the walls of heavy metal that kind of made all of us grow closer and created like this almost family bond with a bunch of guys that, I consider some of them to be the best wrestlers in the state. Guys like Great Scott, Little Evil, who used to be Prince Adam, guys that would come weekly, I got to see Jazzy J Sirius cut some of the best promos I've ever heard, making me laugh like unrelentlessly. Jazzy J Sirius is probably the best talker in the state, maybe in the country, and that's coming from a guy like me. Like that, I believe Jazzy is head and shoulders above everyone. But yeah, it's just like guys that I hadn't really been able to work before either. I hadn't been able to wrestle. And you just grow around a different crowd, and it makes you think differently. Then, like it's one thing to be around the same people that you came up with in wrestling, but when you kind of get surrounded by other people that came up in different ways, it just allows you to expand a little more. So going back to your original question, heavy metal was like the like first thing that I did. It was weekly. From there, you meet people in the locker room. I met King Rob Love, who got me booked in, McAllen. From McAllen, I meet a person that books me in Laredo. From there, the doors open to like Abilene for New Texas when New Texas was running in Abilene through Kiefer, who I had known from like it's just kind of like this, network of people that you meet, across the years, and ultimately that leads you to certain places. So yeah, man, I mean, it's kind of I've never been one to send the email and be like, hey, I'm so and so, here's pictures of me, here's my highlight tape, here's matches of me. I've kind of never really been that person. I know it's an important part of going elsewhere, but I've always kind of been proud of if someone has wanted me to work for them, they come to me and they ask me. And I think that's a bigger thing to hold on your, pat yourself on the back for, is just that like other people recognize how good you are. Other people recognize your talent.
And unfortunately, Full Metal would shut down. And you said you've made a lot of personal close connections there. And since then, you've moved on to work, like I said before, a bunch of promotions. What would you say, at least backstage and in ring wise, was your favorite promotion to work for?
Um, that's a tough one. I don't want to get in any trouble. I will say heavy metal is probably up there, just because I was around them for so long. When they shut down, it was kind of like a piece of me, left for a little bit. And it was another thing too, just because we had certain fans that would come every single week. And every single week they would make noise. They would travel to see us. Like if we were in a different city, they would drive 5 hours, 3 hours to come see us, to come see the heavy metal guys. And they would start heavy metal chants where no one else knew what the hell they were talking about. Like it was just this like it was an atmosphere. The show had an atmosphere to it that I think hasn't been replicated. And that was something that I really dug. I dug it a lot. And, I don't think I'm ever going to wrestle at a place like heavy metal again. So that's probably top for me.
It's feels almost like a community out there. And I definitely get what you're talking about. I haven't been attending indie wrestling shows for too long, but when I started going to reality of wrestling shows or New Texas shows, it really felt like the same people were always showing up, and they're really true fans. I remember at reality wrestling, the same two old couple would be sitting front row every week watching wrestling, and I was like, that's the coolest thing ever to me. That these guys will drive 2 hours to watch a wrestling show, for about 2 hours, drive home, and they'll do it again. That's
And
really
I mean,
cool.
and it wasn't just heavy metal. Like when I was at Row, there were certain people that I met at Row like who weren't like one of the boys per se, or in the locker room, but guys that like made me feel special. Like they remembered me, or when they saw me on a different show, they were like, "Yo, man, like it's good to see you again." That meeting people that contribute to us that have no reason to contribute to wrestling, but they come down and they pour into this guy Chris Ortiz. I don't know if you've been able to meet Chris Ortiz. He's a children's author out there in Houston, and he would come to Row when I was there. He would come on Wednesdays and he would teach us Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and just had no like there was no reason for him to drive 2 hours to teach us jujitsu, but he did. And I appreciate that so much because it's a guy that knows that we're special and knows that we can be something. And he sees that. And I think that's the teacher in him. The teacher in him sees that. And he's like, no, man, I want to invest in you guys and I want to help you guys become just overall better wrestlers, better at your craft. So, there's those in Houston, and then Texoma, you see like the fans that come every single week. Like there's, it's all over. And I don't want to forget anybody, but it's just like that is a constant of just like there are the regulars,
Definitely. And when you've traveled everywhere, and when you come to a organization like United, and you started wrestling here pretty often, and they decide they want to put the championship on you, I'm sure it feels special no matter where you go to, for an organization to want to make you the guy. But how's it been being the United champion?
Well, brother, being a champion has a lot of responsibility, but it's also something where I can make this something to where when the next guy has it, it means more. I feel like that's your ultimate responsibility as a champion because you can't be champion forever.
Right.
I know what we're seeing on TV right now says otherwise.
Yeah.
But you can't be champion forever. Someone's going to win that belt from you. And I think me being the inaugural champion shows how much faith Dave, who runs United, has in me, and how much he respects my ability, which I thank him for. But ultimately, I want to be able to make this title something that means something in the long run. Not just to be a champion that doesn't do anything and it's just I'm the champion and that's it. I want to create moments while I'm the champion. I want to make people feel a certain way about me while I am the champion, whether good or bad, because as long as they feel something, that means they're invested. And whenever someone does beat me for this championship, that person is a star. And that's the game.
Definitely. You said making that championship more important when you eventually do have to pass it on to the next. And you said having these moments, having people have certain feelings about you and that belt. How do you kind of make that championship important? Like how do you evoke those feelings from people about that belt specifically and you yourself?
By being Teflon John, bro. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to
Yeah.
be is just Teflon John, because
Mm.
Teflon John will make you feel a certain way. The person that I become when I step through that curtain will make you feel a certain way. And I feel now I have the confidence in myself to make that consistent, to make that a consistent thing, whether I'm in Austin, whether I'm in Dallas, Houston, or in my backyard in San Antonio. It doesn't matter where I'm at. Teflon John is going to make you feel a certain way. And because I make you feel a certain way, when I am the champion, you're going to feel like that even more. It's that's wrestling, man.
Oh man,
That's
I'm
what
getting like
wrestling is.
goosebumps. Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
promo, man. That's very nice.
See,
And
I can't turn it off, dude. Like it's
yeah,
just
it's a
it's a
part of you.
thing now. It affects my daily life sometimes, but it's like, it's part of me now.
Hey, ever the storyteller. So, life is stories. Life is a story. Might as well tell it right, right?
Mhm.
So, you are a really young guy. You're only how you said you were around like 25?
I'm 25 years old, yes.
That's insanely young for this business and to be at the level you're at. So, you're performing at a high level. You are a champion for United. What do you see kind of in the near future for yourself as Teflon John?
As Teflon John, see, that's the kicker. As Teflon
Yes,
John,
sir. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for old John there. But as for myself, personally, I see life. I see, the journey of becoming an adult is over. It has concluded, and now it is time to step forward into, full adulthood. Of just like full responsibility for myself. And I think that's something that, as a wrestler, you can kind of get lost in the shuffle. How important that is, how important it is to be, able to take care of yourself. I think a lot of us, when we first get into wrestling, we're attracted to the bright lights, bigger city type of thing that they present to you of like, hey, you can be a big star, you can be, the next person to sell out the Garden or sell out stadiums. But what's more important to me is, whenever I do decide to hang up the boots, what do I have outside of this to show for my life? To show other people, like, hey, like, I wasn't just a wrestler. Because if I was just a wrestler, then I feel like that's a failure at life. Wrestling is not my be
Interesting.
all end all. Yeah. Wrestling is not my be all end all anymore. It was when I was a kid. When I was young and I had no responsibilities, yeah, of course I want to be like a TV star. Of course I want to be, and part of me, like, there's always the part of you that still does.
Mhm.
Like, if something presented itself of like, hey, this is a good opportunity, yeah, sure. Why not? Why not take it? Um, but I do always think about, when all of that's over, when the curtain's gone, when the ring is gone, who am I? Like, what do I have? And I feel like that's a question that I've had to ask myself more and more these last couple of years, of just like, what do I have for myself? You know, what do I have outside of this world that, you know, in all honesty, is not real. You know, it comes to an end when the people leave the building. Like the world doesn't exist until the next show. And there's so much time in between those two shows that it's like, well, who are you in that time? Who are you when no one's watching? Is the
Yeah.
question that I've had to ask.
This is really interesting. I feel like I never hear wrestlers talk about wrestling like this. Like when the show ends, it's something else gets turned on. It's
Well,
back to
brother, that's
reality.
because they're not self-aware. You know, they don't know who they really are. That's the problem. That's the problem. Everybody wants to be superstars. Everybody wants to be big mega stars selling out buildings, selling out stadiums. But who are you? Who are you when no one's watching? Because that's the real test. That's the real litmus test. Is who are you when there are no cameras? Who are you when there's no fans in the crowd? Who are you when you're sitting on your couch at home, sitting in your head with a drink on your table? Like, who are you? What are you watching? Who do you want to become? Forget wrestling. Forget the ring, bro. Who are you out there? Anyways.
Oh man. Yeah. No, but back to that. If you said the end all be all, you won't be just known as just a wrestler. So, what do you want to be known as? What are the passions of your life outside of wrestling? Who are you as a person?
Have you ever heard the Tarzan soundtrack?
Yeah, the Phil Collins?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
There is a song, and it says, "In learning you will teach, in teaching you will learn. Son of man, look to the sky. Son of man, a man in time you'll be." I think, if anything, when I leave this earth, I want to be able to say that I left I left as a servant. I left as someone who saw things that like other people could accomplish and helped them accomplish it. Because I've always been under the impression that life isn't about me, you know. And sometimes when I catch myself being selfish, I have to start kind of like going back and being like, whoa, wait a second, like always remember you're only here for X amount of time. And I don't feel like I should spend that time being selfish. I shouldn't spend that time being someone who only cares about what's good for them. Because I've kind of seen how selfishness can ruin a lot of things. Can ruin things that are good, good in nature, and start with the best intentions. But the more that selfishness creeps in, the more it gets ruined. And I always want to be someone that puts the well-being of other, people that I care about, uh, in not in front of my own well-being, but almost parallel, because you do have to take care of yourself. But if you can be someone that people know will always be there for you, will always come to you when you're in trouble, and will always make sure that you are living the best life that you possibly can be. If I can be one of those people, that would be something better than any title, better than any stadium, better than any main event. That is my true goal in life. And I feel like so far I'm doing an okay job at that.
Wow, this has definitely been one of the most interesting conversations I've had because it's not all about wrestling for you. It's not the end all be all, and you're an incredibly self aware person, and I find that the goals you have to be truly kind of inspiring, and you're not a very self serving person. You know, you like to
Yeah.
serve the others. Especially when you're talking about the championship as well. You weren't talking about having the longest reign with the belt or being the greatest United champion ever. You're talking about how can I make it the best belt for the next guy. So this has been truly, truly cool, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I always I always respect people trying to start up, shows and trying to like make their own way. I actually used to have a podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was called the Hooligan Hour with my friend Brock Baker that I met at Reality of Wrestling, the Cash Money Hooligan Brock Baker. We started a podcast about a year into me being in Houston. So it's interesting, like to be on this side of the interview because I was able to interview a bunch of people while I was on that show, but being on this side and seeing someone else in the seat that I was in a couple years ago, I think that's something that it's like, I'm more than happy to contribute my part.
Oh, I really appreciate that. It's been a really interesting journey just doing this podcast. We've been doing it for about like 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm only one half of Restless. Me and a friend Jake started this. We met at a Uno tournament at U of H, and he, he noticed that my nickname was Scotty Too Hottie because my name's Hottie and I was a play off Scotty Too Hottie. He's like, "No way, you watch wrestling?" And then we're like, "Yeah." A month later, we have a podcast.
Isn't it something that it's like it's almost like you have to catch something that someone says or they have to like wear wrestling is like this unspoken likeness of like, hey, I like this, but like no one else does, so I kind of keep it like on the
Exactly.
DL. So when you find someone, it's like, oh, hey, you like this thing that I like too, like
Yeah.
let's be friends, please.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. I think I ran into someone the other day, and they were wearing like a John Cena shirt, and I was like, "Yo, that's so cool!" Like, I never meet wrestling fans. Like, bro, there's like over millions and millions of followers for WWE on Instagram. We're all in hiding, you know. We don't.
Yeah, we're all out there somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Teflon John, again, I thank you for doing this, and for the listeners at home, make sure to check out Teflon John. Where can they find you? Your socials and anything like that.
You can find me everywhere except TikTok. You can find me everywhere at Mr. Teflon John. I don't know if uppercase or lowercase matters, but Mr. Teflon John across all platforms.
Definitely. And if they have trouble finding it, I'll put it in the link for the description. And as always, guys, stay restless.